Wyoming Territory, 1878. The wind howled low across the plains, carrying dust and the scent of distant rain, as August Paxton pulled his horse to a stop beside the smoldering rubble of a wagon that had clearly burned the night before. He dismounted slowly, hand resting on the butt of his revolver. The air was quiet, too quiet. Then a small cough came from behind an overturned crate. August stepped forward and crouched. Two faces peeked out, twins, maybe 7 years old. A boy and a girl. Their clothes were torn, faces streaked with soot, but they were alive. "I ain't gonna hurt you," August said gently, kneeling down. "Name's August. You two all right?" The girl clutched her brother tighter, eyes wide and full of fear. We been waitin'," the boy said, voice rough. "Mama and Papa told us to hide when the fire started. But they never came back." August looked past them at two bodies covered with a tarp near the wagon wheel. He took off his hat, breathing deep. "What are your names?" he asked. "I'm Elsie," said the girl finally, voice small. "He's Elijah." August nodded. "All right, Elsie. Elijah. I ain't gonna leave you here." They did not cry, not then. August saw the way they clung to each other, how they had already started to understand loss. He wrapped them both in his spare coat and lifted them onto his horse. They rode west for 4 days, the sun burning high above, the land stretching out forever. August kept the children close, riding slower than usual, stopping often to let them rest. He made them a fire every night. Cooked beans and biscuits, let them pet his horse, told simple stories about cattle and the stars. It was not much, but enough to keep the silence from swallowing them whole. On the 5th day, they crossed into Sweetwater County and came upon a quiet homestead tucked between two hills with smoke curling from the chimney, chickens scratching in the yard. August dismounted and walked up to the porch, the twins watching him from the saddle. The door opened before he could knock. A woman stood there, holding a rifle. She was young, maybe 23, with sun-dark skin and sharp eyes. Her hair was tied back, sleeves rolled up, a streak of flour across her cheek. "Do not move," she said. August raised both hands. "Ma'am, I got 2 orphans on my horse. They need shelter. Just asking for a meal and a roof for the night. Nothing more." She studied him for a moment, then lowered the rifle slowly. "What happened?" "Wagon fire. South of the Laramie route. Parents didn't make it." She stepped outside, eyes moving to the children. Elsie was holding Elijah's hand tight. "I'm Helena Zeller," she said. "You can stay the night." That evening, Helena made cornbread and stew. The twins ate like they had not eaten in days. August watched quietly, grateful. He had not meant to get involved. He had been heading to Oregon, planning to join a cattle drive and maybe buy some land. But he could not walk away from 2 children with no one else. Now, sitting in Helena's warm kitchen, he was not sure what came next. Helena poured him coffee after the children were asleep upstairs. "You are not their kin," she said. "No," August said. "Just found them. Could not leave them." "You heading west?" "That was the plan." She tilted her head. "With 2 children?" He chuckled low. "That is the part one have not figured out yet." Helena leaned back in her chair. "I run this place alone. My parents built it before cholera took them. I have goats, a horse, and a garden. It is quiet, but it is mine." August nodded. "It is a good place." She studied his face. "You planning to leave in the morning?" "I do not know," he said honestly. "I do not know what is best for them." Helena stood, gathering the dishes. "Then stay a few days. Let the children rest. Decide after." 3 days turned to 5. August helped around the homestead fixing a loose beam in the barn, hauling water, setting a new fence post. The twins laughed more now. Elijah followed August like a shadow, and Elsie spent hours in the kitchen with Helena. One afternoon, Helena found August on the porch, hammering a broken chair back together. "You are good with your hands," she said. He glanced up. "My father was a blacksmith. Taught me what he could." She sat beside him, wiping her hands on her apron. "You are good with the children, too." "They are good kids," he said. "They just need someone to keep them safe." Helena looked at him quietly. "And you? What do you need?" August paused. Looked out at the land stretching toward the horizon. "Never had much," he said. "Just wanted a place to belong. A reason to stay instead of keep riding." She was quiet for a long time. "I buried my fiancé out behind the apple tree," she said softly. "He died in a flood 3 years ago. Since then, it has just been me." August looked at her. "I am sorry." Helena nodded once. "I thought that kind of love would never come again." His voice was low. "Maybe it never comes in the same shape twice." They sat in silence, the wind brushing across the porch boards. That night, storm clouds rolled in. Rain came hard and fast, drumming against the roof. August stood in the barn, checking the horses, when Helena stepped in. Her dress was damp at the hem, hair loose around her shoulders. "I could not sleep," she said. "Me neither." She looked at him. "You are still thinking of leaving." "I do not want to take from you," he said. "You have a life here." "I do," she said. "But maybe it is time I shared it." He stepped closer, heart pounding. "I do not want to leave," he said. "I just did not know if I was allowed to stay." Helena reached for his hand. "You are." The next morning, August found Elsie and Elijah sitting at the kitchen table with Helena, all 3 of them laughing. The smell of cinnamon filled the room. He stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment, something warm spreading in his chest. This was not what he planned. But maybe it was exactly what he needed. He walked into the room, and Helena looked up, smiling. "You hungry?" she asked. August grinned. "Starving." And for the first time in a long time, he sat down not as a traveler but as someone who might finally have a place to stay. By late April, snow still clung to the shaded folds of the hills, but the soil in Helena's garden had begun to soften. The ground gave a little under August's boots as he set a post hole with the iron auger. Elijah knelt nearby, holding a coil of hemp rope like it was treasure, while Elsie picked through a pile of seed packets Helena had carefully laid out on a burlap cloth. "Can we plant the yellow ones?" Elsie asked, holding up the corn seeds. Helena knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her palms. "Not yet. Ground still too cold. Beans first, then peas. Corn waits till the moon turns full." August looked up from the fence line. "You sound like you were raised by almanacs." Helena glanced over. "I was raised by a woman who knew the land better than her own bones. My mother didn't read much, but she could smell a frost before it came." Elijah tapped the auger. "Can I try it, August?" He handed it over, keeping a hand steady on the boy's back as Elijah leaned into the tool with all his weight. "It's heavier than it looks." "I can do it," Elijah grunted. "I know you can," August said, not easing his grip. Helena stood, brushing her skirt off. "Lunch is near ready. You'll both want it if you're planning to finish that fence before sundown." August waited until Elijah had twisted the auger a few turns, then took it back smoothly. "We'll be in soon." When Helena stepped inside, August watched her go, the soft sway of her braid catching the light. She'd worn her father's coat that morning, sleeves rolled to the elbow, the hem mended in places with uneven stitches. He liked that about her, that nothing she owned was for show. Elijah sat back on his heels. Are we staying here forever? August kept working the hole deeper. What makes you ask that? The boy shrugged. Just wondering. There was dirt beneath his fingernails, and his boots had gone stiff from drying too close to the fire. August could see the way he looked at the barn each morning, like he half expected someone else to come out. You miss the road? August asked. Elijah nodded, quiet. August paused. It's all right to like both. A place to stay, and the memory of moving. The boy didn't say anything else, but he stayed close as they worked. Inside, the cabin had taken on the smell of lentils and bay. Helena had simmered them with salt pork and wild onion, and Elsie had set 4 tin plates out with a precision that made August's throat tighten. No one had asked her to. She'd just done it, like she wanted to belong to the rhythm of the place. Helena handed August a bowl, her fingers brushing his. You'll sleep in the house tonight. Weather's turning. He hesitated. You sure? I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't. That night, the wind carried sleet against the windows. August lay on a cot beside the hearth, the fire low but steady. In the loft above, Elsie and Elijah slept hard, their breathing even. Helena crossed the room in stocking feet and handed him a quilt. You've been waking early. Old habit, he said, tucking the cover to his chest. Cattle don't wait. She sat across from him, her lantern casting a soft amber light that flickered along the seams of her dress. I've been thinking, she said. About the land behind the barn. It's flat, and it drains well. He nodded. Good for pasture. Or a second cabin, she said. If someone wanted space of their own. He held her gaze. You want me to build one? I want you to know there's room. Not just for passing through. She didn't say anything else. Just rose, lantern in hand, and climbed the ladder to the loft. August didn't sleep much, not from restlessness, but from the quiet weight of the thought she'd left him with. He could see it now, a second cabin, a few more goats, maybe chickens again. Elijah helping with the roof. Elsie carrying kindling in her apron folds. A life that wasn't borrowed. At first light, he was out in the yard, checking the fence line. The sky was clear, the air sharp. Helena came out with a tin mug in one hand, steam curling from it. You always start this early? She asked. Helps me think. She handed him the mug. Then think with this. He drank, eyes on the horizon. Would you mind if I built that cabin? Helena folded her arms, a slow smile rising. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. He looked at her, really looked, the way a man does when he's done running and knows it. Then I'll start today. She nodded once, and turned to head back inside. August watched her go, the weight in his chest no longer something to carry, but something to build around. By the first week of May, the frost had gone out of the ground for good. The cottonwoods along the creek had begun to leaf, their pale green buds trembling each time the wind moved through. August had marked out the foundation with twine and stakes, and now he worked steadily, cutting timbers from the stand of lodgepole pine along the ridge above the pasture. The work was honest and quiet, and each evening he came in with sawdust on his sleeves and sweat darkening the back of his shirt. Inside the house, the rhythm of things had changed without anyone deciding it. Helena no longer sat just 3 places at the table. The twins had begun learning how to read from the small stack of books Helena kept on a shelf, weathered volumes with fraying cloth covers and penciled names of her mother's hand. Elsie took to them quickly, sounding out words at the hearth with her brow knit in concentration. Elijah was slower, more restless, but Helena had a way of keeping his focus with stories about prairie dogs and lost mail riders. One morning, Helena stood by the stove, stirring cornmeal into boiling water, and said, I thought you'd go back to Oregon come summer. August pulled on his boots by the door. That was before. She didn't look up. Before what? Before I started planning where to put a chimney. She turned then, the spoon still in her hand. You've picked a spot for it? South wall. Gets the sun in winter. Helena set the spoon down and wiped her hands on the cloth by the basin. I was never sure if this house would be more than just mine. I stopped thinking about that possibility a long time ago. August crossed the room and leaned his hip against the edge of the table. You're not the only one who thought they'd be alone longer than they were meant to. She didn't speak, just reached for her shawl and opened the door to let the morning light in. Outside, the chickens scratched at the bare earth by the shed, and the twins ran along the edge of the creek, their laughter caught by the breeze. That evening, August returned later than usual, carrying a bundle of fresh-cut planks over his shoulder. Helena was in the garden, turning rows with a hoe. He dropped the wood by the cabin frame and walked to her, brushing sawdust from his hands. You ever think of putting in potatoes? He asked. She looked up. I don't have enough hands for digging them come harvest. You do now. That night, after the twins were settled, Helena stepped out onto the porch. August was already there, sharpening his drawknife beneath the lantern's glow. She sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, and said, You ever have a family before? No, August said, not pausing in his work. There was a girl once, back in Kansas. Her father didn't like the idea of a ranch hand with no land to his name. Helena nodded slowly. I was supposed to go east with my cousin after the flood. But I couldn't leave what my folks built. You stayed because it felt like something worth holding on to. I stayed because I didn't want to be someone who left. August set the knife down and looked out over the dark fields. You're not. A silence stretched between them, not heavy, just full. Helena stood and moved to the edge of the porch, her arms folded against the cool air. The twins sleep easier now. They don't startle when the wind hits the shutters. They've got a roof that won't burn, and 2 people watching their backs. Helena turned her head. You count me as one of those people? I'd count you as more than that. She stepped back toward him then, slow, deliberate. You ever think about staying in one place for good? I've thought about it every day since the night we came through your gate. She reached for his hand, fingers calloused from fieldwork, and said, Then let's build something that doesn't move. August closed his hand around hers. We already are. They stood there in the hush of the evening, the porch boards creaking beneath them, while the stars came out one by one. The wind carried the scent of turned earth and ash from the hearth, and somewhere in the dark, an owl called from the cottonwoods. Behind them, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned. A late spring rain came steady for 2 days, softening the ground and filling the narrow creek that cut behind the barn. Helena stood on the cabin's half-built floor, watching the way water pooled between the joists. The roof frame had gone up just before the clouds rolled in, and August had spent the afternoon tacking oilcloth over the rafters to keep the boards dry. You figure we'll be able to shingle by week's end? She asked, arms crossed against the damp. August leaned against a beam, his hat pulled low. If it dries out by Friday, we'll start. Otherwise, we wait. Helena brushed a loose curl from her cheek. Waiting never sat well with me. It's not my favorite either, he said. But wood splits easy if you rush it wet. The rain tapped softly overhead. She looked out toward the hills, where the horizon blurred with mist. I never saw a house go up from the ground before. You're in it now, he said. Every nail, every line. It'll hold stronger because of it. She stepped down from the platform and walked toward the garden, where rows of young shoots had begun to show through the soil. Elsie had wedged small stones beside each to mark them. The girl had a way of noticing small things: a bent stalk, a broken shell, the kind of attention Helena hadn't seen in many children. Inside the house, Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor with a chunk of soft pine balanced across his knees. August had given him a whittling knife 3 days earlier, and he'd been working on a shape ever since. Helena knelt beside him and watched the careful way he drew the blade back. What's it going to be? she asked. A horse, Elijah said, without looking up. She tilted her head. Looks like a dog. It's not finished. Helena smiled and stood. I'll come back when it has a mane. Later, while August repaired a split yoke in the barn, Elsie found Helena at the back gate. The girl held something behind her back, her face bright despite the drizzle. I made you something, she said. Helena crouched. Is that so? Elsie brought her hands forward and opened them. A chain of wildflowers, early prairie pink and 2 sprigs of yarrow tied neatly with thread. I made one for Mama once, Elsie said. But she said flowers were for people who stayed still. Helena's throat tightened. I think she would have liked this one. Elsie looked down. Do you think she'd be mad I like it here? No, Helena whispered. I think she'd be grateful you were loved. That night, August lit the fire while the children played a quiet game of stones near the hearth. Helena brought in a pan of baked squash and set it on the table. I got a letter this morning, she said, laying it beside August's plate. He looked at the envelope, worn at the edges. From who? Widow in Medicine Bow, Helena said. Her brother's got a team of oxen he can't keep through summer. Says they're trained and steady. August sat back. You thinking of buying them? I'm thinking if you want to break more ground, 2 oxen might make it easier than your shoulders. He studied her for a moment. You're planning ahead. She met his gaze. I'm planning for us. August reached for her hand without a word, and she let him take it. After supper, he stepped outside, the sky clearing over the hills, stars blinking through the last of the cloud cover. Helena joined him, her shawl pulled tight. You ever miss the road? She asked. Not the way I used to, he said. There's nothing out there I haven't already found here. She nodded. I used to think stillness meant giving up. And now? Now I think it means staying close enough to watch things grow. He slipped his arm around her waist. Then let's grow it slow and right. They stood that way until the lantern inside flickered out, and the only sound left was the wind moving gently through the cottonwoods. By early June, the smell of sun-warmed pine and sage drifted through the valley, and the cabin frame behind the barn stood nearly complete. August had added a stone hearth with Elijah's careful help, and Helena had sewn curtains from flour sacks for the single front window. The walls hadn't yet been chinked, but the shape of the place was there, a roofline against the sky, a door that opened toward the house. That morning, Helena stood by the root cellar, sorting the last of the stored onions, when August came around the barn with a length of rope looped over his shoulder. His shirt was damp from work, collar darkened near the neck, and he carried the easy quiet he always did when his hands had been busy for hours. I saw a wagon coming up the ridge, he said, setting the rope aside. Single axle. Looked to be a woman driving. Helena wiped her hands on her apron and looked toward the road. Probably Mrs. Harrow. She comes through twice each year with her boy to trade salt pork and lye soap. August nodded. She looked tired. Might be worth offering coffee if she stops. She'll stay for supper if we ask. Helena turned to go inside. She's not much for conversation, but she's got good ears. Knows what's happening east of the river. By the time the wagon creaked into the yard, Elsie had already drawn a chalk line across the porch floor and was explaining to Elijah how to play a game she called Trader's Path. Helena stepped out with a tin cup of coffee as the woman climbed down, her long skirt dusted with grit and her boy already hopping off the back with 2 bundles in hand. Helena, the woman said, setting the brake with a practiced hand. I brought lard, 6 bars of soap, and a jar of molasses. You got anything needs sharpening? August can look at your tools, Helena said. And we've got stew on. Stay if you can. The woman gave a slow nod and passed the reins to her son, who led the mule toward the hitching post. August stepped forward without a word, taking the heavier bundle from the wagon bed and hauling it toward the porch. Helena caught his sleeve as he passed. "I never asked, do you miss trading towns? Being around people more?" He set the bundle down and glanced over at the others. "I've had enough of talk that doesn't mean anything. What we have here feels real. That's what I want." That evening, after the woman and her boy had gone, Helena brought out a small bottle from the back of her cupboard, apple brandy her father had bartered for the year before he died. They sat on the cabin step, the new one, notched and sanded smooth. The sun threw long lines over the grass, and the smell of charred wood from the cooking fire lingered in the air. She passed the bottle to August. "You never said what you'd call this place." He took a sip and handed it back. "I figured it wasn't mine to name. You've built half of it. It's yours as much as mine." He looked out over the field, where the goats shifted in the dusk. "Then I'd call it something quiet. Something that doesn't need announcing." Helena leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think that suits us." Inside, the children had fallen asleep on the braided rug, their legs tangled, the way only siblings could sleep. Helena stood to cover them with a quilt. When she turned back, August was still at the threshold, his hand resting on the doorframe he'd carved himself. "I've been thinking," he said. "Once the cabin's finished, I don't want to sleep in it alone." Helena held his gaze. "You don't have to." He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, and set his hat on the peg beside hers. The next morning, they rode into town together, with the children bundled in the back of the wagon and a basket of eggs between them. The church was small, whitewashed and sun-bleached, with a bell that cracked the air once every Sunday. The preacher was a kind man with a voice like worn wood and a wife who handed out rhubarb preserves from her apron pocket. They stood before the altar with nothing but the sound of the wind through the open windows and the children watching from the pew. Afterward, they returned to the homestead, where Helena changed into her work dress and August built a fire beneath the outdoor oven. They baked bread, fried salt pork, and let the children pick wild strawberries from the slope behind the garden. That night, Helena took the quilt from the loft and laid it on the bed in the new cabin, where the walls held in the warmth and the oil lamp glowed low. August stood at the threshold, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled, eyes softer than Helena had ever seen them. She reached for his hand. "This is our home now." He pressed his forehead to hers. "And you're my family." Under the roof they'd raised together, with the scent of pine in the rafters and the muffled sound of frogs in the creek, they lay down side by side, not as strangers brought together by chance, but as two people who had chosen each other, every step of the way. Years passed. The goats multiplied. The garden grew fuller each season. August built a shed for tools, then a smokehouse. Helena taught Elsie to sew and Elijah to read the weather in the shape of clouds. Neighbors came more often. A midwife rode up one summer morning and stayed through a long afternoon. They named their daughter Ruth, after Helena's grandmother. That winter, they all slept under the same roof, with August rising early to keep the fire lit and Helena humming softly as she rocked the baby near the stove. No one wandered anymore. They had found their place. And it held.